Greetings to all. My name is Rifile Sekete, and this is my video on the OPV assignment, making a brain model. So in this part of the video, I'm going to be explaining or showing you how I made my brain model. So the first thing that you're going to need is to go onto the internet and find a picture or as an example of what it is that you're looking for. So you're going to find a picture such as this. So this shows you the outline of the brain. So you're using this as an example as to what your brain is supposed to look like. And as you can see below here, I made some notes on what it is that I want to include into my brain, and a few colors down here as to what color scheme I wanted to actually go with. Secondly, you need these kind of pens, these color pens or ink pens that are going to help you color in your brain and outline parts of the brain. Thirdly, you're going to need highlighters. These are the highlighters that I used in order to make my brain model. And I use these to color in different parts of the brain so that they bring out more color. And with more color, it helps me focus on what it is that is being said, and it tunes in my brain into what I'm actually doing, so that, you know, the theory that if you use certain colors, your brain tends not to get bored. It becomes interested in what you're doing. Unlike if you're using gray or just dull blue, your brain becomes bored and therefore you shift your focus into something else. That's why I decided to use so many different bright colors, right? And I use the black marker to outline my brain, right? So the reason for the black marker is so that I could outline these parts of my brain so that the colors on the inside become more effective, they become brighter. A skill you will learn in creative arts, might I add. And then for the different materials that I used to make the brain model, I used bottle caps. I found them very useful. I used some different colored bottle caps. I used straws as well. So this is what I did with the straw. I cut it up into small bits and pieces, which I found really helpful to tie them together. I used the packet of my favorite sweets, if I might add. So what I did with these was I cut them up into 3 pieces. So I'd take a jelly baby and cut it up into 3 pieces. So when you open a jelly baby, it becomes very sticky on the inside. So that helped me to just put it down on the paper without having to use glue, which really helped me save a lot of my glue. And then I used a can of my favorite cold drink, which is Twist the lemon flavor. Right, so what I did with this can is cut it up, roll it into smaller pieces, which I'll be demonstrating soon, to add to different parts of my brain as well. I also used some of the can clips as well as part of designs for my brain. And the most important, I know I said that something else important, but the most important tool was my scissors, which I really know how to use wisely, which helped me cut up a lot of things. So let's get into the model of my brain. So as I had said in the first part of the video, that I will be showing you the final product. So this is the final product of my brain. As you can see, it is on an A4 paper. You see the different parts of the brain that is labeled for you out here. So as I had explained, that with the sweets, starting with the frontal lobe, because I believe that this might be the biggest part of the brain as it is the front side. So you can see with the lobe that I cut up the sweet into 3 small pieces on a yellow colored part. So why I colored these parts, I colored this part yellow, is so that the yellow part brings out more color into the sweets. You can see more of the sweets. You can see how differently I placed them, and I didn't just place them according to color, was so that to draw people's attention. You know, as you become a teacher, the most important part is to educate, but you can educate by doing it in a fun manner so that learners are able to learn but also have fun at the same time. And why not use colorful methods and sweet methods? So this is why I use the frontal lobe. One can also notice that the frontal lobe is important for judgment, foresight, and involuntary movement, and even smelling. How interesting. Moving on secondly to the bottle caps. As you can see how I aligned the different bottle caps, as I had said previously that I love color. I believe that when things are more colorful, they're more interesting and it shows a bit more effort into the work that you as a person put into your different projects, your different tests, your different assignments. It just makes much more of an effort to see you using different colors, to see a person using different material, and that is why I use these materials for my brain. Now, the partial lobe, as you can see, is colored in pink. I decided not to add bottle caps to these parts just to show you that I had colored them in a bright pink color, right? So this is to distinguish that this is the partial lobe, which is actually used for comprehension and language, which is really something important in the lives of children in South Africa. And as an educator, I believe that this part of the brain should be stimulated more and more and more often, so that learners in South Africa are able to understand more and more different languages to stimulate their brain and help their brain to grow, but also for them to comprehend. Because if we really look at things, what is the point of a child or a person understanding a language but they don't know how to comprehend? What is the point of a child reading but they don't know how to comprehend what it is that they're reading? That's why I believe comprehensions are so important, especially in the language field. Now, thirdly, looking at my temporal lobe, which you will notice that I used sharpened pencils. So the reason why I used sharpened pencils and highlighted or colored it in orange, so as you can notice that the orange brings out the sharpened parts and it makes the sharpened parts look so interesting, like small little tutus or umbrellas or a small beautiful dress. What I'm trying to achieve here is to show you the different ideas that can go into making this part of the this part of the brain, which is particularly interesting because the temporal lobe is used for intellectuality and emotional functions and hearing, which I do believe that mine is overly stimulated because I'm a very emotional person, right? Now, moving on to the fourth part of my brain, which is the occipital lobe. Now, if you notice in particular, the occipital lobe is, I used cans in order to make it, and I decided to go with a more green feel when it comes to this part of the brain, which is not the smallest part, but it's the back side of the brain, which is really important because it's the primary visual area. So our eyes, the nerve sensors in our eyes are connected to this part of the brain to help us see. So I believe that if a person can see something, if a person can visualize something, they're able to remember it better. So that's why I decided to go with green, because it's really an easy color to remember because of the place that we live in. If you look at South Africa, it's very green in certain areas such as Gauteng, Pretoria in specific. It's very green. Where you see green trees, a learner might be able to remember, hey, my teacher said today that is the occipital lobe and it is primarily used as the visual area. So it becomes easier for learners to remember in this way. As a teacher, please always remember that your whole life is linked to educating a learner, and if you do that, your personality becomes better and therefore you become a better teacher and educating better students, making South Africa a better place in general. So the second last part of my brain is the cerebellum. So as you can notice that I used cut up straws in white and red as a background for my cerebellum, which is really interesting and is a really interesting mix of colors, which I do believe these little straws look like marshmallows, and if my learners are able to remember it like that, it makes life really easy. Now, this part of the brain in particular is used for coordination, so it's used to coordinate. It works with everything else, and this can be really important to all students for them to understand what this part of the brain does. Now, lastly, ladies and gentlemen, focusing on the brain stem. As you can see on the brain stem, I use the inside parts of the can and the outside clip stuff of the can, and using blue for this reminds us of liquid, reminds us of a flowing ocean, maybe even a river, which is the calm side of the brain. And in particular, the brain stem is used to regulate functions such as swallowing, breathing, heartbeat, wakefulness center, and other involuntary functions. So if a learner can see a can and they look at this can and they remember, oh, my teacher said that this part of the can was used as a brainstem, and the brainstem regulates or is responsible for all the parts that are involuntary in a person's body. It would really help learners to remember things easier, and that is why my part of the brain looks like this. So much color, so much creativity went into it. And I know that it's not very common in university students, but I thought that this might bring a bit of a different perspective as to how we should be doing our project. Right. So in the final part of the video, what can be seen as what I found interesting about the brain was I didn't know that the brain had 4 different lobes. I also didn't know this particularly interesting fact about the brain stem. So as you can see in what I said in the previous part of the video is that the brain stem regulates all the involuntary actions of the brain, such as swallowing, breathing, heartbeat, wakefulness center, and other involuntary functions. So I always thought that that part of the brain was regulated by the hypothalamus or the medulla oblongata. But when I saw that it is the brain stem, I found it particularly interesting, and I see that it's a fact I'm never going to forget. Also, focusing more on the partial lobe, as something I found interesting was that the partial lobe has to do with language and comprehension. So what I learned was the more languages you learn, the more foreign languages you learn, such as Mandarin or Indian languages, or even more languages in general, it basically helps grow your brain. So when you give your brain more information, it's like giving your brain more juice in order for it to grow. And that is something I found particularly interesting. Now, I do have a few questions regarding the brain, such as where and how do mental disorders form inside of the brain? Why do certain people have certain disorders? And if they do and they eventually become healed, how does that happen inside the brain? And also, how is it that the brain can erase certain memories but keep some memories? Like, for instance, studying for a test, I can remember certain things, but I can't remember other things, which I think has to do with the short term and the long term memory. But also, how is it that I can forget what I did for my birthday 10 years ago, but I can remember the kind of dress I was wearing? It becomes really confusing, and I just really have those certain questions as to how the brain works regarding memory. But something for me that I am reflecting on when I did this very beautiful, stunning, colorful brain model was that I noticed how coloring in between the lines and outlining the whole part of the brain helped me relax, helped me become in tune, and just helped me calm down and do this brain model, sorry. And I noticed how these different colors kept me interested, and how I wasn't bored as to, okay, I'm just doing this because I need marks, right? But I focused on how interesting this might be and how I might use this as a teacher for future references. So for me, those are the things that I just really found interesting on this. Thank you so much for listening to my video on the brain model, ladies and gentlemen.